Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel where we freaking learn. Today we're reacting to Geography Now France. France. If we're planning on going to TwitchCon in Paris, which will most likely happen this year, I think it's about time we learn a little bit about the country. I know some things about France, but let's see what Geography Now has to say about it. I'm sure there are lots of things I don't know. If you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe, and also come see me on Twitch. I'm loving meeting you guys and talk to you guys about this kind of stuff. And a bunch of other random stuff too. Let's do this.
Comme certains d'entre vous le savent, un huitième de moi est français. J'ai donc en quelque sorte une obligation de honorer mon héritage.
It's time to learn geography.
I'm totally guilty of that.
Hey everyone, I'm your host Barbie. France. Pretty much everybody on the planet has heard of this place. I mean, immediately images of wine, cafes, embellished 18th century Baroque architecture, and people who really hate globalization of the English language. But take a step back even further, and France becomes a place with jaguars, coconuts, volcanoes, penguins, grass skirts, war dances, bamboo flutes, witch doctors, and a multifaceted history that has evolved into a people group into becoming one of the most notable nations on the planet. Alors, allons.
I definitely have to admit that I'm not super familiar with a lot of France's history. Especially like way back. That's interesting. The grass skirts and things, never would have put that image in my mind when it comes to French history. Fascinating. Okay.
Allons-y. The first thing you need to know about France is that it's not just European, but a transcontinental country that spans across 12 time zones, more than any other country in the world. Mais comment est-ce que possible? Laissez-moi expliquer, garçon. France is kind of divided into two main parts. The European Metropolitan France, where about 95% of the population lives, and the overseas French regions, departments, and territories, otherwise known as the Département et Territoire d'Outre-mer, or DOM-TOM. Before we tell you what they are, let's explain the difference between them. Regions have exactly the same legal status as mainland France and the same civil, penal code, and administrative social tax laws. However, they can be slightly adapted to suit the region's particular needs. In collectivities, the autonomy rises and they are empowered to make their own laws, except in certain areas like defense, currency, trade, and diplomacy. The overseas regions are Guadeloupe and Martinique in the Caribbean, French Guyana in South America, which by the way has the Kourou Space Center, disputably the best.
Do you guys pronounce it Guadeloupe or Guadalupe? I feel like I've heard it's pronounced Guadalupe. But he said Guadeloupe. I'm just wondering what you guys pronounce it as. I wonder if there's a right or wrong way to say it. Probably not, but yeah.
Best in the world because it adds an extra gravitational slingshot effect because it's so close to the equator of the Earth, and Réunion and Mayotte off the coast of East Africa. The overseas collectivities are French Polynesia, you've probably heard of Tahiti, that's French Polynesia, as well as Wallis and Futuna in the Pacific, Saint Pierre and Miquelon right off the coast of Canada, Saint Barthélemy and Saint Martin, which is the only place in France that has a border with the Netherlands, as the Dutch own the southern part of the island, located all in the Caribbean. The only islands that lie under the title of overseas territories are the French Southern and Antarctic Islands, or the TAAF. These
and that's right below Africa?
Islands are made up of the Kerguelen Islands, the St. Paul and Amsterdam Islands, you can probably guess who used to own those, the Crozet Islands, and Adélie, the acclaimed slice of Antarctica that is technically not recognized thanks to the Antarctic Treaty. And as of 2007, the scattered islands in the Indian Ocean, remember the Comoros episode, were added to make the 5th district of the territory, even though half of them are disputed with Comoros, Seychelles, and Mauritius. These islands are mostly uninhabited and only house temporary military or scientific personnel. Finally, France administers two special territories that don't quite fall into any of the previously mentioned categories. There's the uninhabited Clipperton Island off the coast of Mexico, which has a crazy murder story behind it. And last but not least, there's New Caledonia, which has a special particular status out of the French-administered overseas territories. New Caledonia is the only one that's vying for a kind of somewhat independence, as the political power was passed to the native Kanak peoples. There is a weird dual French EU and New Caledonian citizenship thing going on. And in 2018, they will hold a referendum to either remain or leave France. And thanks to all—
Did they say 2016? Wait, when did this come out? Hold on. This, well, I guess this is in 2016. Wait, is that what they said? Hold up.
All these territories in 2018, they will hold a French EU and New Caledonian citizenship thing going on. And in 2018, they will hold a referendum to either remain or leave France. And
does anyone know what happened there? I can Google it. Oh my gosh, that's funny. It's weird watching videos sometimes that are filmed years ago because things have changed since then. So if anyone knows, go ahead and put it in the comments so I don't have to Google it. I'll probably Google it anyway, but so other people know maybe. I love that.
Thanks to all these territories, they together give France the second largest executive economic zone in the world after the US. Whew. Okay, now let's go back to metropolitan Europe, France. The country is located in Western Europe, bordered by 8 other nation states. Don't forget little Andorra and Monaco, along the coast by the English Channel and the Bay of Biscay in the north and west, as well as the Mediterranean Sea to the south. Mainland France is sometimes referred to as the hexagon, since if you tilt your head a little bit, it kind of looks like it has 6 sides. Quite frankly, I was always under the impression that it kind of looked like a teapot with feet. Mainland France is also divided into 13 regions.
I'm never gonna stop seeing that. The teapot with feet. That's seriously so cute.
Regions, including Corsica Island, 18 altogether if you include the overseas regions, with the capital, largest city, as well as the main cultural and commercial center, Paris. We could talk on and on about Paris, what with the unbelievably designed metropolitan layout, the rich, vibrant atmosphere, the juxtaposition of classically adorned historical sites along neo-contemporary architecture, the food, the shops, and of course, au soleil, sous la pluie, à midi ou à minuit, il y a tout ce que vous voulez aux Champs-Élysées. But that in itself would take too long, and we gotta get through 3 more segments.
What's he talking about? I didn't understand any of that. I'm like, hey, what's the street? No, what does the words mean? No, what's he singing? No, nothing. Oops, my cursor is on here. Nothing. Somebody help me with that one.
Busiest airports are the 2 Paris twins, Charles de Gaulle and Orly International, as well as Nice, Côte d'Azur, and Lyon Saint-Exupéry and Marseille Provence International. At around 643,000 square kilometers, France is the largest country in the EU. The interesting thing about France is that it's kind of divided into areas that historically had their own distinct cultural identity. Some of the most notable ones being Occitania, Savoy, Brittany, Normandy, Alsace, a section of the Basque Country, Nice, and the island of Corsica, which speaks its own dialect most French people can't even understand. These regions contribute their own unique piece of the French pie. Speaking of pie, we all know about French food, which is great because we're going to discuss more about it in...
Okay, yay.
If you look at France's physical makeup, you start to kind of understand why food plays such a huge role in their culture. Everything just kind of works out perfectly for them. For metropolitan France, big, rich, nourishing rivers and their tributaries like the Garonne, Dordogne, Loire, Seine, Meuse, and Rhône entangle the entire country north to south, east to west, allowing an abundance of irrigated crop fields to exist in nearly every corner of the country. Now add on top of that the fact that the country does not have any major fault lines. They enjoy a nice oceanic European climate, and they don't suffer regularly from any major natural catastrophes. Most of the country is made up of arable flat plains or small rolling green hills that are just begging for cultivation, and voila, you have an agricultural gold mine. In fact, out of every country in the EU, France reportedly has the highest quality of soil performance and resilience, and only a few spots like in the Caucasus region and parts of Eastern Europe and Southern Russia rank higher. So there you go, food haven. In the south, you reach the mountainous regions of France, including the Pyrenees along the border with Spain, the Massif Central Plateaus, one of the most geologically studied places in Europe due to this strange formation, the Alps all along the borders with Italy and Switzerland. By the way, Switzerland was all like, yeah, I'm not gonna share Lake Leman, it's mine! And that's how Geneva was born. The highest point in France, let alone all of the EU, is Mont Blanc, found in the French Alps along the border with Italy, only second in height to the Caucasus Mountains in all of Europe. If you consider the Caucasus region a part of Europe, some people don't, but that's another story. France is a cornucopia of produce, dairy, and meat. Every region has their own specialty, but 2 things are everywhere: cheese and wine. The French are the largest consumers of cheese with over 1,200 different varieties found all over the country. The French also have a larger range of unconventionally consumed meat products. Most countries stick with beef, chicken, pork, maybe lamb or goat, and fish. However, the French aren't satisfied with just that. Other animals like pheasant, duck, goose, quail, rabbit, venison, veal, horse, frogs, and snails are consumed regularly. Speaking of which, the national animal is the Gallic rooster, which is why you might typically see a lot of roosters on French-affiliated symbols. In fact, France is one of the most entomophagous, that's insect-eating, countries in Europe, as about 700 million snails are estimated to be consumed every year by the French, especially in Burgundy, the largest snail-producing region in France.
Shoot. Do we have to try snail when we go to France? Do we have to do that? Tell me I don't have to eat snail. I'm fine to eat cheese and wine. That's great. No, I feel like you have to try it at least once when you go, right? Or is that just something that, I don't know, is that people just say to get other people to eat snails? I don't know.
Unfortunately, due to the fact that the French are the highest consumers of raw or mildly cooked red meats, a huge portion of the population is either exposed or chronically infected by the Toxoplasma gondii parasite that disputably over half of the population is suspected to have. This little guy eventually...
My headset just died. Oops, hold on. That's not a good time for that to happen. What in the world? That's terrifying. So half of the population is, you know, estimated to have this parasite. Can you get that from snails? I'm just wondering. Or is that just from, like, raw red meat? I need to know this information before I go. Okay, anyway.
It finds its way into your brain, changes people's half the population is suspected to have. This little guy eventually finds its way into your brain, changes people's behaviors into being either more caring or aggressive and suspicious. Look it up, I'm not even joking. The Alps are famous for their charcuterie and fondue, Brittany for its crepes, Cantal for its chestnuts, Dijon for its mustard, l'Aveyron for aligot, Rheims for its champagne.
We have a lot of Dijon mustard here. I wonder what the differences are, if there are different types of Dijon mustard. I wonder what the American version of Dijon mustard, I wonder how it compares. That's very interesting.
And then we get to Bordeaux. Now, first of all, every region of France likes to claim that they have the best wine. However, it's widely known that Bordeaux is disputably the home of the largest wine vineyards in the world, pumping out over 500 million liters of wine a year. The French take their produce maintenance very seriously and became the first country in the world to ban supermarkets from throwing away or destroying unsold food since February of 2016. All businesses must donate wastage to either charities or food banks. To combat crop wastage on farms, France has even opened up ugly fruit or vegetable shops in which you can buy disfigured produce for 30% off. Other than foodstuffs though, main exports are aircraft, chemicals, machinery, iron, and steel, electronics, motor vehicles, and pharmaceuticals. Of course,
there you go. Really quickly about the food, the misshapen food and things like that. There is something here, and I don't know if I don't know where it comes from, but there are multiple companies now that allow people to buy big boxes of random produce or food that didn't really quite make it into the grocery store, that didn't quite hit the regulations. So it would be misshapen carrots, stuff like that, or maybe chips that were too small, or, you know, things like that. And I'm kind of interested. I'm kind of interested to looking into that because, I don't know, I'm all about, well, I'm not all about, I waste food as well. But I think that that's a really cool concept. And that's interesting that France made it basically illegal to throw that kind of stuff away. Very, very interesting. I mean, not for just citizens, obviously. Very fascinating.
Of course, the overseas territories and regions also have climates and topographies that are completely different. The Caribbean islands and Guyana enjoy a warm Caribbean tropical climate, Guyana being part of the Amazon, having one of the highest forest cover densities in the world at over 95%, with over 1,100 species of birds and reptiles and mammals found in it.
French
Union
Guyana,
and Mayotte
interesting.
off the coast of Africa have deep jungle ravines and a common volcanic activity going on. The scattered islands are mostly uninhabited sandbanks and lagoons with nothing more than just a few trees and shrubs. The southern Antarctic islands are rocky and desolate with few grasses and vegetation. Kerguelen has these cabbage-looking things going on, and these islands typically freeze over in the winter with penguins stampeding off the coasts. New Caledonia and French Polynesia are tropical Pacific islands that enjoy an abundance of rich, unspoiled, thick jungle, brush, and colorful flowers. And of course, Adelie Land is like all ice and Antarctica. All right,
I feel like whenever anyone in France wants to make a movie, wants to film a movie, they never have to go anywhere outside of France. I feel like they have all biomes, all different kinds of weather, all different kinds of land. They can just, you know, you don't have to go all the way to New Zealand to film. You got it all. That's so funny. Wow.
We've discussed borders, boundaries, mountains, food, volcanoes. Now let's talk about who's running the entire show. France is a country of people that are very, very intent on making sure that you know they are French. First of all, the country has about 67 million people and is the second largest in Europe after Germany, making 13% of the EU alone. About 85% of the population is white, 10% are North African, mostly from the Maghreb regions, a little over 3% are black, and a little less than 2% are Asian. The currency is the euro, they use the type CEF outlets, and they drive on the right side of the road, which makes things interesting when their neighbors from the UK come across the channel. Now let's talk about the white people. Most white French people have some or partial Celtic or Gaulish origins, as historically the Gauls inhabited most of the centralized regions of modern-day France. That means genetically, the French and British have a lot more in common than they think. Of course, an admixture of Latin and Germanic roots also applies, as all three people groups had their stake of claim in France as well. The name France even came from the Germanic Frank tribe. French is, of course, the official language. However, regional dialects do exist, but for the most part, they do pretty well at making sure everyone speaks it. Granted, the linguistic zones that we mentioned before each have their own flag, flag still cling on to their mother tongue, and sometimes you can even find street signs written in these languages. For example, Breton, a Celtic-based language related to Welsh and Irish, found in Brittany, Basque in the Basque country, Occitan in Occitania. Corsicans have like this strange half French, half Italian hybrid thing going on. Keep in mind though, most of the languages spoken in the linguistic zones are kind of dying out, and only the older generation really retains daily conversation in those languages. Outside of metropolitan France, the overseas departments and territories each speak French, but in addition typically have their own creoles or dialects. For example, in the Caribbean, Martinique and Guadeloupe might say "Ça a marché, tout bon man, ti mal man." In Reunion or Mayotte, they might say "Quoi fait, comment il est, à où." France is the most visited country in the world, as more people than the entire population of France visit France annually at about 80 million. Culture-wise, there is too much to discuss. I mean, we are talking millennia of tribes, wars, empires, heroes, villains, artists, poets, architects, kings, queens, guillotines, revolutions, inventions, music, dance, clothing, fashion, cinema, cuisine, discoveries, victories, losses, folklore, science, literature, medicine, and baguettes. To cover it all, we would need a whole separate YouTube channel. But for what it's worth, since the Middle Ages, France has been able to show time after time again that it has been a global force to be reckoned with. I mean, the French at one point in time had the second largest empire in the world, spanning across virtually every region on every continent. One thing you have to understand is that in a fast-growing Anglophone-driven global economy, France is very, very firmly intent on preserving the French language and culture. The governmentally sanctioned Académie Française has aimed at doing this since 1634. They do things like, somewhat unsuccessfully, banning foreign words such as blog, hashtag, parking, email, and weekend. In addition, the French media's top regulators, the CSA and CNC, have strictly enforced policies that require all music on private radio to be at least of 40% French origin and 70% in the French language between the hours of 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and half of the music quota must be less than 6 months old.
Do you guys feel like that's the same way? Anyone who lives in France, do you feel like that's changed at all? Because I know it has been like, oh gosh, coming up on 10 years in a few years. I wonder how much of that is still, that way, because that's really fascinating. That's kind of interesting to me.
Thing must be French. France is, of course, home to a plethora of notable figures in every field of academia and athleticism. I mean, they have almost 70 Nobel Peace Prize winners, including famous chemists Pierre and Marie Curie. Few people know that they had a daughter who also became a notable scientist. Other scientists, writers, and philosophers like Descartes, Pascal, Baudelaire, Flaubert, Pasteur, Châtelet, Bouton, who, by the way, invented the metric system. Musicians like Rameau.
I should know that, huh?
Lully, Debussy, Jacques Brel, Edith Piaf. Of course, we can't forget the fashion icons Louis Vuitton, Coco Chanel, and Christian Dior. I mean, it's no secret, France is often touted as the fashion capital of the world. Artists like Monet, Cézanne, Renoir, Degas, Manet, and Gauguin. And of course,
I recognize a lot more of the artists, which is very interesting. Maybe that's because I took an art history class or something like that. I feel like we talk a lot about art, maybe in France, and not really much else, which is fascinating.
Episode about France without mentioning anything about Kings Louis XIV and XVI, Joan of Arc, and Napoleon. In a simple way of putting it, French culture is very vibrant and proud. The French love where they've come from and how they go about doing things. The Catholic Church once played a major role, and to this day, even as a secular state with dwindling church attendees, many French people still, in the very least, identify nominally as Catholic, mostly for a cultural thing. It's just their history and they don't want to toss it away. They also love taking breaks and getting their sleep. On average, the French get about 8.83 hours of sleep every day, more than any other country in the developed world. And they also have some of the shortest work weeks with only about 6 to 7 hours on average a day. And that's enough for them. It's not uncommon to see people taking time off in the middle of the day, early evening, just to relax and take a nap. They even have a word for it, l'heure de l'apéro, which literally translates to the hour of the apéritif. People can also claim state pension at age 62, making it one of the lowest retirement ages in the world. And of course, the sport French people rank highest in the world, going on strike. I mean, the last thing you want to do is interrupt a Frenchman's nap during a 6-hour shift with corporate policy changes. Yep, the world can be a cruel, cruel place. Let's see how France survives in the jungle.
Oh dear. I do remember that. When it comes to France,
they don't discriminate. They hate everyone equally. No, but seriously, France has their eyes on a few people, and when they see what they like, they cling on and make you a treasure. First of all, Francophone nations and Latin-based former Roman legacy nations generally get the high seats, especially their neighbors like Switzerland, Luxembourg, Italy, and Spain. Quebec, Canada is to France kind of like what the USA is to the UK. They adore each other, they love each other's accents, but they love making fun of each other even more, even though they are really close. Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia are the closest African nations as they make up the largest African immigrant demographics, followed followed by sub-Saharan African countries like Cameroon and Côte d'Ivoire, or Ivory Coast. For France, Japan is seen as like the epitome of exoticism. Similar to themselves, the Japanese have a rich culture of noble tradition, things like castles, attire, and food. Likewise, Japan sort of shares the same mutual fascination and see France as like its European alternate universe twin. There's no two
Oh, it's like their proper friends, you know? It's their fancy friends. That's so cute.
countries that like to poke fun of and borderline harass each other with the French as the UK and the USA. As historical rivals with the UK, I mean, they did have a 100-year war with them, and the USA busting their chops about World War II all the time. All sides like to satirize each other in cartoons and media all the time. Nonetheless, they are actually really close. The UK and France have been crossing borders and intermarrying for centuries. Commerce and student exchanges are high, and the US was helped by the French during the Revolutionary War, and they even gave the Statue of Liberty as a present. So fellow Americans, thank France for Lady Liberty, okay? It was a kind gesture. France's best friends, though, would probably be Germany and Belgium. It's kind of funny because historically, the only country that...
I didn't realize that Belgium's flag was basically... It's like almost Germany's flag. I never noticed that. Seeing them next to each other, I'm like, oh... I could easily get those mixed up, I feel. How funny.
Was consistently an opponent of France was Germany. Ever since the split of Charlemagne's empire in 3, most of Europe's history was driven by the overarching rivalry between variations of France and all variations of Germany, including the Holy Roman Empire, the Teutonic Order, Prussia, and of course, the Third Reich. But the plot twist was the creation of the EU. Following Robert Schumann's speech that states explicitly that for Europe to even hope to work, the millennia-old rivalry between France and Germany has to be resolved for good. Ever since 1950, France and Germany have taken a lot of political inspiration off of each other. Heads of states have visited each other on numerous occasions, and both countries have been the biggest advocates for the survival of the Union. And Belgium is like their little brother that moved out and got a Dutch-speaking roommate and visits France every so often to raid their fridge and do their laundry. In conclusion, les Français sont connus pour être intrépides, turbulents, mais qui gardent quand même un certain charme. Ils ont parfois l'air désinvolts, mais bon, essayez de vivre dans un pays envahi 24 heures sur 24, 7 jours sur 7, par des hordes de terroristes qui piétinent vos jardins, massacrent votre gastronomie et vous demandez de vous plaire au moindre de leurs désirs sans même vous dire un petit merci. Oh, France.
I do that.
Faut le comprendre. Stay tuned. France's rich former little colony, Gabon, is coming up next.
Okay. Every time someone from France comes into my chat, I'm always like, oh, merci! And I'm probably saying it completely wrong, but they usually are really nice about it. They're like, oh, merci! It's so nice. Thanks, guys. That was really fun. It makes me excited to visit France. It makes me a little bit nervous about the snails. Not going to lie. But that was really interesting learning about where everywhere kind of France territories are. I wasn't completely aware that they're like all over the place. That's kind of cool to me. So good for them. If you like the video, yes, like and subscribe. And then definitely put your comments in the, down below comments. Let me know what else you would like me to watch. If there's anything about this video that you know a video on, or if you, I don't know, have someone who would be wanting to talk about it, let me know. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching with me, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!